Greetings and welcome back to the World Numismatic News as we continue to explore Jefferson Nickel varieties you should know. The first coin to look at here is a very nice tripled die variety from 1956. When it comes to the Jefferson series in the 1950s, the repunched mint marks really tend to get all of the attention, but if you ask me, then this coin should be on every coin roll or variety hunter's list as well. The effects of the tripling, yes, that's right, tripling, and not just doubling, can be seen on most of the letters on the reverse, but the letters of America is always the best place to spot this variety. All of the letters should show this effect, but both A's, the E, as well as the C should be the easiest to spot, with clear tripling shifting closer towards the rim of the coin. The last O of Monticello is also a good place of interest to examine while you're in this region, with the tripling shifting towards the southeast in this case. In early January of 2020, an NGC graded example of this very variety coin with a grade of MS67 was sold at auction for $288. Then we have an interesting variety that could easily escape notice if you're not paying close enough attention. This is the 1941 S Nickel, and the variety in question here is due to the mint mark being placed onto the coin upside down, making this the 1941 inverted S Jefferson Nickel. This also uses the small s mint mark style, and the best way to spot this variety is really just to compare the serifs of the S to see if their placement is in the correct orientation as indicated here, with the inverted S towards your right and the normal small s towards your left. And also be careful not to confuse these with the large S mint mark style, which is a completely separate and different variety for this date, and I already looked at that in a previous video in this series. In 2019, a PCGS graded example with a grade of MS65 of this particular variety coin was sold at auction for $192. From there, we now look at a 1946 nickel from the San Francisco Mint. This coin has class 5 or pivoted hub doubling on the obverse of the coin. Due to the pivot point being located nearer to the west end of the coin, the doubling is clearest on the letters of Liberty, especially the latter half of that word, where all of the letters are doubled nicely towards their right. The star dividing the date from Liberty is also doubled, with the points of the star nearer to Jefferson being the clearest in this respect. And then of course, the date is doubled very nicely with the same orientation as Liberty due to the counterclockwise rotation of the second squeezing. Oh, and did I mention, of course, there is some very severe die damage over Jefferson's ponytail as well. Kinda hard to miss that one. So, in 2016, an MS66 example from PCGS was sold at auction for $1,175. Take a look at a few different war nickel variety coins, and a good place to start is with the 1944 D over D nickel. Now, a key, in fact the main identifier for the wartime nickel, is the fact that the mint mark appeared towards the top of the Monticello building in very large and obvious letters, which makes it ideal for variety collectors and coin roll hunters to spot repunched mint marks. In this case, the D was repunched slightly towards the east, making it appear as though the final placement of the D is tipping forward ever so slightly. Quite unmistakable. In late 2018, an NGC graded MS67 example with 5 full steps of this variety was sold at auction for $204. And then from the Denver Mint, we head westward still towards the San Francisco Mint native in the 1942 S/S Jefferson Nickel variety coin. And not just a simple repunched mint mark either, but actually a coin where the S mint mark was triple struck. As with the first coin, again, the final placement is towards the east, and the initial placement can be seen quite easily towards the west. However, closer examination will swiftly reveal that the S mint mark was restruck twice. Most noticeably, this can be seen on the upper curl of the S, where clearly two punchings can be distinguished. A single die pair appears to have been responsible for this particular coin, as a further diagnostic is found on the obverse, where a rather lengthy die crack is seen across Jefferson's collar, extending all the way to the rim, and another still running across the tip of his collar as well, in a more diagonal orientation. In 2019, a coin like this was sold in a PCGS slab, graded as MS65 for $300. Okay, so this is a nice one. Not a repunched mint mark though, but the 1943 double die obverse coin, completing our mint mark triumvirate of sorts. On this coin, there is strong doubling on all of the obverse letters, with the doubling displaying towards your right on this particular coin. This is seen on the letters of In God We Trust, but also on Liberty, and the same impressive effect is also seen on the date, where all of the numbers are very nicely doubled. But the single feature that this coin is best known for is Jefferson's eye, which is almost completely doubled towards the southwest, earning the nickname of the 1942 double eye nickel. In 2015, a PCGS graded coin in a rather impressive grade of MS67 with full steps to boot was sold at auction for $5,405. A double die obverse variety from the series' debut year in 1938. Although doubling is found on the words Liberty, In God We Trust, as well as the date of this coin. In other words, basically all of the obverse elements. The hallmark that is best identified with this variety is without any doubt the strong doubling that is seen on Jefferson's profile image. This is easiest to spot on the nose, the lips, as well as his chin, with all elements clearly and unmistakably doubled towards the left across the entire profile. During 2018, a PCGS graded MS64 example with full steps was sold for $300. And then it's time to look at a variety to be found in a modern proof set, the 1968 S/S Jefferson Nickel coin. All in all, a fairly straightforward repunched mint mark variety. However, it's unusual as it's included in a proof set, which are usually subjected to more stringent quality control measures. To identify this coin, take out your 1968 proof set and see if the S mint mark on the nickel appears to be doubled towards the east. The top serif of the S is where you are likely to notice this effect first, but the lower curl is also similarly affected, although to a much lesser degree, that is. And look inside the cavity of the upper curl as well for additional signs of the initial S mint mark. In 2017, a PCGS graded MS67 example of this variety was sold at auction during the Summer Fun Show for nearly $400. Another interesting variety to examine is the 1958 D over D repunched mint mark coin. However, this is no ordinary repunching, as the initial D mint mark was in reality struck in an inverted position, meaning that the D was placed in effect upside down, leaving the rounding of the D, usually seen towards the right, here visible towards the left, remaining underneath the straight bar of the D to the left. This is quite a scarce variety coin, and very few of these have actually been reported to date. In 2016, a PCGS graded MS64 example was sold for a reported $1,295. Here we have another repunched mint mark variety from 1941, S Nickel. This one is actually fairly straightforward, as these things tend to go. The final S was struck directly towards the north of the initial punching, leaving the remnant of the lowest serif just below its final position. The middle swirl of the S is also similarly affected, but this is admittedly not quite as easy to see as the serif would be in the same case. Just as a point of further interest, this coin also is typically seen with several die gouges or scratches just inside the rim, slightly above where the mint mark should be positioned. A difficult coin to track down, and in 2010 an MS65 PCGS graded example appeared at auction where it sold for $1,840. The next variety to look at comes to us from 1939. This coin is the result of class 6, or distended hub doubling, and is definitely one of the more difficult varieties to properly identify, as the main attribute is simply that the letters on the obverse are slightly thicker than they really ought to be. However, there are a few things that you can keep an eye out for that might help here. Look towards the bottom end of the letters, as they will likely display the effects more clearly, in a more defined manner at least. The G and O of God is a good place to start, and then keep working your way around to the other letters as well as the numbers in the date as well. Because of the relative obscurity of this variety, there are really not a lot of examples floating around in the marketplace, but you can expect a healthy premium for an attractive coin like this all the same. And then, while we are loitering around 1939, we might as well take a quick look at one of the best known varieties for the series as a whole. The 1939 double die reverse, or what is more commonly referred to as the doubled Monticello nickel. This is due to the very strong doubling that can be seen on the word Monticello that displays towards the east of the letters. It is very unmistakable and should be very easy to spot if you come across one. The letters of 5 cents are also similarly doubled, to quite dramatic effect as well. There is more doubling, such as on the letters of states and towards the right of the profile elements of the building as well, but the doubling on Monticello and the denomination are really the key highlights of this variety. And in 2019, a PCGS graded MS67 doubled Monticello nickel with a full steps designation as well was sold at auction for the rather impressive sum of $23,500. I thought we might take a look at a few of the proof-only varieties from the series and start off with a coin only found in the 1990 proof set. This is the 1990 S double die obverse Jefferson Nickel coin. This coin has some counterclockwise pivoted hub doubling that expresses itself clearly on the letters of In God We Trust. Look towards the right of nearly all of the letters to see the signs of this doubling. The N of in as well as the W of we are always the easiest places to spot the doubling, as well as the serifs on the E and the S as well, which should be nicely doubled in their own right. The designer's initials should also be doubled quite nicely towards the southeast, in addition to the previously mentioned doubling. In 2020, a NGC graded Proof 69 Ultra Cameo coin sold at auction for $372, although it does also bear a mention that previous sale prices for this coin in a similar grade have typically leaned to almost nearly double that amount in the past as well. From there, back to 1953, and not the more well-known double-die obverse issue from that year, but rather a coin that was struck with a rather obviously re-engraved obverse die instead. To identify this coin, simply look at the ribbon that is tying Jefferson's hair at the back. You can clearly see that it was strengthened or re-engraved by hand in order to make the details pop a little bit more, and in so doing extend the working life of the die by just a bit. This was a trick that was used quite a bit during the 1950s and well into the 60s even, so you can look out for similar things like this on Lincoln pennies and other denominations as well from the same relative time frame. One of these coins sold at auction in 2019, slapped by NGC as a proof 67 plus grade for the price of $264. And if we're talking about proof Jefferson Nickel varieties, then for my book, it doesn't hardly come any better than the 1971 No S proof dime. Now, keep in mind that the following counts only for the proof coin version of this issue, found in the 1971 proof set and not the normal business strike circulating coin. And as the name suggests, the S mint mark from the San Francisco Mint, where all of the proof coins were minted, is missing on this particular variety. While not nearly as rare as some of the other No S variants that are also out there, but quite valuable in its own right as well. And in 2016, a PCGS graded proof 69 deep cameo example was sold at auction for the sum of $7,637.50, while a more recent auction in 2020 sold a coin in a slightly lower grade of proof 68 plus deep cameo for $2,100. 1953 offers a very good example of just such a coin in the form of a double-die obverse variety. In this coin, the letters of "In God We Trust" all betray the doubling to unmistakable effect. This is especially clear on the G of God, where you should see doubling to the bottom of the letter, clear separation to the serif, and similar splitting on the top ends of the letters should appear as well. The rest of the letters, like the W and E of we, should also then have clear doubling to them as well. In 2017, a PCGS graded proof 67 deep cameo example was sold at auction for the closing price of $2,640. Moving on to the proof issue of 1957 from there, we discover a quadruple die obverse variety. Now, this is a slightly odd one, as for the most part, the doubling is seen as no more than additional thickness to the letters of "In God We Trust," Liberty, the Star, and the date. However, there are also a few more definitive identifiers that you can also look out for, the best of which should be clear notching on the bottom serifs of the letters of Liberty. Pay particular attention in this respect to the last few letters of R, T, and Y. The star should also have separation lines to the points that remain parallel towards the rim of the coin. By far though, the date is the place where you should ideally be able to see the doubling to its most dramatic effect on this particular coin. Look here towards the flag as well as the bottom left part of the base of the number 1 to see very clear doubling. 2017 saw the auction of a PCGS graded proof 67 example of this variety coin that sold for $312. Now, then we have a proof nickel from 1960 to look for, and this time the doubling is In fact, another quadrupled die reverse variety this time. Now this takes the form of class 2 or distorted hub doubling, so the best place to look for or spot the doubling on this coin would naturally be the design elements closest towards the rim of the coin. In this case, we look at the letters of E pluribus unum, with the parts of the letters that are parallel towards the rim being of interest as they would display the effect of this doubling most noticeably, such as the base of the solitary letter L and the E as well. The bottom rounding of the U would also be of interest, and so forth. Also of interest would then be the various letters of the United States of America portion of the design, especially the O of, where you should be able to see this very nicely indeed. Now, in terms of value, this coin would typically fetch a few $100s in a reasonable grade. However, in 2016, a coin from the Steve Strom collection, graded by PCGS as Proof 67 Cameo, was sold at auction for a record sum of $998.75. We head back to the silver alloy or so-called wartime Jefferson Nickels of 1943. This is a 1943 P nickel with some extremely attractive doubling on the obverse. Doubling is seen on virtually all of the letters, including the date, liberty, and In God We Trust. Due to the counterclockwise rotation on this class 1 doubled coin, the doubling on the letters of liberty can clearly be seen towards the right of all letters on this word. The letter E, however, is an excellent example of this, with all serifs clearly and completely doubled. The star separating liberty from the date should also be doubled to a similar effect. And then, of course, we have the date, which is also doubled. Although in this case, it is not nearly as noticeable as it would be on the letters of liberty, for instance. In terms of value, though, estimates range from around $20 for a low-end example of this coin to $300 to $400 for a high-grade coin. Then let's take a look at a variety from 1942. This time, however, not the silver alloy coin, but rather the older style copper nickel type instead. This is again a double die obverse, although now we see a very good example of offset hub doubling instead of the rotated hub doubling of the previous coin. Though we do see doubling on most of the aspects of the obverse design, at least to one degree or another. The best place, however, to spot the doubling overall is on the bridge of Jefferson's nose, which is doubled rather dramatically towards the west. Now, as mentioned, the letters of liberty and In God We Trust are mostly all doubled as well, and can be examined for confirmation of this variety, but most of these pale in comparison to the absolutely fantastic doubling that we can see on the numbers of the date, especially the 1, the 4, and the 2 of 1942. In 2016, a PCGS graded coin like this, slabbed as MS65 with full steps, was sold at auction for $646.25. An absolutely wonderful variety listed in the Red Book with very good reason is the 1943 P over 2 overdate variety coin, which also just so happens to be a minor double die obverse coin as well, but the overdate is certainly the key point of interest for this variety. This particular coin came about when the die was first impressed with a 1942 dated hub, and then subsequently finished with a 1943 dated hub, creating this 1943 over 2 overdate. You can see where the base of that initial number 2, and especially the lower diagonal portion of that number, is still remaining on this coin. In 2021, a coin graded as MS67 with full steps designation as well was sold at auction in a PCGS slab for $3,840. Subscribe to WNN and activate notifications with the bell icon so you'll know when new videos are released. For the World Numismatic News, I'm Numisman saying thank you for watching, keep collecting, and of course have a fantastic day.